afternoon. Welcome to Criminalist Behavior Podcast, the podcast that takes you deep into the heart of Louisiana's history and current, most chilling true crime stories. I'll be guiding you through the darkness of these crimes and all of those involved. Each week, we dig deep on those forgotten crimes or those crimes that are currently happening with the underlying legends that continue to haunt us. So lean in, listen, and get ready because true crime is anything but ordinary. Stay with me as we unravel what happened in these mysteries. So, today we're on part 2 of the Baton Rouge Serial Killer, Derrick Todd Lee. This is going to be episode number 44, and if this is your first time listening, hi, my name is Sarah Sevier, and I'm your host for Criminalist Behavior Podcast. I want to thank you for listening to the show, and I really hope you enjoy it. So, if you haven't watched part 1 yet, I highly recommend you do, first and foremost, but I'll give you a little synopsis on what this case is actually about. So, Derrick Todd Lee was a famous serial killer, and he was 34 years old, and he had a criminal record that included a 2-year prison term for burglary and a history of just stalking and being a peeping Tom. He lived in St. Francisville with his wife and his 2 children. He had a 13-year-old son and a 7-year-old daughter. And according to the children's school officials, they stated that Derrick Todd Lee and his wife actually pulled their kids out of school and then fled to Chicago and then ended up in Atlanta, Georgia. And police say that his wife and children are safe, but they are actually in hiding. And Derrick Todd Lee was a serial killer from the years of 1998 to 2003. He terrorized the area surrounding Baton Rouge and Lafayette, Louisiana, and he committed murders of at least 7 women. And throughout all of this, Lee's wife her family states that Lee's wife lived in denial on her husband being convicted of these horrible crimes. So she was just really in denial. She didn't think her husband was guilty of this. So a little synopsis of part 1. Lee was in prison for a burglary in November 1992, and he served 2 years. Through the months of September 1995 through January 2000, he was arrested various times in Lake Charles and Zachary, Louisiana, on battery, suspicion of being a peeping Tom, and stalking. In April 2000, Derrick Todd Lee was convicted of flight from an officer in one incident and sentenced to prison for 2 years, and a judge also revoked his probation on an earlier stalking charge. In January 2001, he was actually released from prison, and the first murder that we are aware of happened on September 24th, 2001, and this was with Gina Wilson Green. She was found strangled in her home in Baton Rouge, and the following murder, which would be murder number 2, was Charlotte Murray Pays, and this happened on May 31st, 2002. She was stabbed to death in her home, and her home was located literally south of LSU, Louisiana State University. And they had a woman that survived Derrick Todd Lee's attack on her who lived in Breaux Bridge. And that attack happened on July 9th, 2002. 3 days after that attack in Breaux Bridge, Derrick Todd Lee abducted Pam Kennemore from her home in Baton Rouge, and her body was literally found in Whiskey Bay 4 days later. Trenisha Dean Combe was attacked in Grand Coteau, north of Lafayette, and her body was found in Scott, Louisiana 3 days later, and she was attacked on November 21st, 2002. So literally, like, the first couple of ones were literally a month apart, 2 months apart. Then he waited a couple of months, and then he did that other one in November with Trenisha. So on March 3rd, 2003, Carrie Lynn Yoder was abducted from her home, and her body was found 10 days later, again, in Whiskey Bay, same place that Pam Kennemore's body was found. And on May 5th of 2003, Derrick Todd Lee was forced to submit a sample for DNA testing in the case to linking him as the serial killer. But the test on the DNA sample would eventually link him to the 5 killings that was blamed on him. And the investigators really thought that he, was the suspect for. And on May 26, 2003, Derrick Todd Lee was publicly identified as the suspect to being a serial killer. And an arrest warrant was issued on behalf of the Yoder case. And then on May 27th in 2003, Derrick Todd Lee was actually captured in Atlanta, Georgia. And the arrest was in reference to naming Lee in a non-fatal July 9, 2002 attack, which would be the woman who survived her attack in Breaux Bridge. So then we're going to jump back to May 28th, very next day of 2003, and Derrick Todd Lee agrees to not fight his transfer being extradited back to Louisiana, because you remember he's in Atlanta, Georgia. And on June 19th, 2003, police say that another victim was actually linked to Derrick Todd Lee because DNA evidence found at Jerry Lynn DeSoto's murder scene was actually linked to him. And that murder occurred in January of 1992. So, now that you caught up on all that little case, I'm going to get to the bottom of the FBI profile and how the trace of this case progressed. So, the FBI profile, the initial profile given, excuse me, about the Baton Rouge murder suggested that the perpetrator was an apathetic white male between the ages of 25 and 35 who would live with others. He would act out in anger and be very controlling, and also he wouldn't be able to handle rejection well, and he would be prone to retaliate. And the profile went on saying that based on his ability to carry a body over rough terrain, he's possibly physically strong and works in a job that requires strength. And he doesn't involve interaction with public in any way. The FBI profile also stated that Derrick Todd Lee would see himself as attractive to women. He, in actuality, is actually socially awkward around them. And Derrick Todd Lee's social economic status is average or below, with finances being, real tight. He would spend time watching women and develop information about his victims. And he doesn't just follow them from a distance. He would actually make at least one attempt to interact with them. And that would be viewed as him being as a harmless person. And the profile went on saying that the killer would get a thrill from taking the risk, and that impulsive behavior suggested that he might have been arrested before for minor offenses in the past that involved stalking and home intrusions. He would be a determined, mission-oriented, and cool under pressure individual. He would follow the investigation through the news, and he could talk about his victims and make comments about the investigation upon being arrested. And furthermore, the profile stated that he would be anxious over being apprehended, but also confident that an event of being apprehended wouldn't actually ever happen. So that is the FBI profile that they suggested of the serial killer, which we all now link to Derrick Todd Lee. And that hit the nail on the head, because if you realize, as I was telling you in the little recap, this is exactly Derrick Todd Lee, right? He was living with his wife and his children. He was if you look at a picture of Derrick Todd Lee, you can see that he was physically strong. But he was one who got arrested for burglarizing and watching these females. So his capture, an FBI offender profile suggested that he was likely to be a white man between the ages of 25 to 35. But this is what threw investigators off, right? Because, as we all know, Derrick Todd Lee is not a white male. He is actually of African American descent. And however, the DNA would later refute the profile and identity of the killer as being 85% of African ancestry. So, in the beginning, they thought he was white, and that's why they never looked at Lee as being the suspect. But in the end, in a detailed, more informative DNA testing, it was determined that the serial killer would be of 85% of African American descent. And while a task force has been formed to investigate all of these killings, it was authorities assigned to the Warren and Muber killings who collected a DNA swab from Derrick Todd Lee on May 5th, 2003 that would be justified in identifying Derrick Todd Lee as the suspect. So the results of the DNA showed that Lee's DNA was consistent with evidence from the murders of Green, Pace, Kennemore, Clone, and Yob. DNA evidence would also later on connect Derrick Todd Lee to the Muber and DeSoto murders. So when authorities went to arrest Derrick Todd Lee, they found him and his family gone. There was also no sign of him at his mother's home or in Cassandra Green's apartment. And Cassandra Green is a person who Derrick Todd Lee would formerly associate with. She would be Derrick Todd Lee's girlfriend. So yes, Derrick Todd Lee was married, had a wife and kids, but he would be seeing Cassandra Green on the side, as Cassandra was his high school sweetheart. So they learned that Lee's wife actually pulled their children out of school within days of his DNA sample being taken. And after announcing that Derrick Todd Lee was the suspect in the series of murders, there were a few places that he could actually hide. And through the investigation, investigators realized he first went to Chicago and then to Atlanta, where he stayed for a week at a cheap motel. And a tip was followed up, and this is how Derrick Todd Lee was arrested outside of a tire shop in southwest Atlanta on May 27, 2003. Atlanta Police Chief Richard Pennington stated in an interview that Lee didn't resist his arrest. And a statement from Pennington is as follows: "I know now that we have taken a very dangerous person that's a serial murder suspect off the streets of Atlanta. I'm sure the citizens of Louisiana are proud, as well as we taken this very dangerous person off of our streets." And then it was later on during that same week that Derrick Todd Lee was extradited back to Louisiana. So there was a testimony that was key into determining a guilty verdict against Derrick Todd Lee. And these 7 murders that was actually pinned to him, the victims' families were all traumatized and exhausted by the capital case trial, and they decided to discontinue prosecution after he received the death penalty in the prosecution of Charlotte Murray Pace. The defense argued that Derrick Todd Lee should be exempt from the death penalty as he had an IQ between 62 and 65, which is classified as a mentally challenged convict with an IQ below 70. And it was stated that he would be unable to understand the seriousness of the crimes committed and should be excluded from being sentenced to death. That was the defense argument. However, due to Derrick Todd Lee's adequate decision-making and his past work experiences, including reading schematics and passing the truck driving license test, the jury rejected that statement that he was mentally challenged, and they felt righteous in sentencing him. So it was a 4-day trial, and several people testified against serial killer Derrick Todd Lee, including his girlfriend and son. Derrick Todd Lee Jr., which is obviously Derrick Todd Lee's son, he excels at football and school. And at this time of his father being prosecuted, he was 15 years old, and he told prosecutors that the knife is believed to have killed Jerry Lynn belongs to his father. And he also testified seeing his dad sharpen the knife many times. But when the prosecutor, Tony Clayton, asked Junior to reveal what his dad had said to him in recent phone conversations, Junior hesitated to answer, and this brought him and his parents to tears. Y'all, can you imagine at 15 years old going against your father in a serial murder case as a witness? My God, that child, I can't even begin to understand how that would feel for being that type of child. That's like my daughter. I mean, she's 16, but my daughter would be testifying against me or her father, for that matter, in reference to something that occurred in murder. I wouldn't be able to put my daughter through that. I don't understand how that actually happened, how they got Derrick Todd Lee Jr. to be on the stand to testify against his father, or if it's something that he wanted to do. But long story short, he testified that he saw his dad with the knife. The knife did belong to his father, and he saw his dad sharpening that knife many, many times. So prosecutors recovered a pair of boots that matched the bloody footprints in Geraldine's trailer. Boots they found in the home of Derrick Todd Lee's girlfriend, Cassandra Green. Cassandra Green testified that the boots that matched the blood-stained footprints in Geraldine's home do look like they belong to Derrick Todd Lee. And although they perfectly match, crime scene experts cannot factually say Derrick Todd Lee's boots are the ones in the world that could have left that footprint in Geraldine's home. So the evidence of that footprint was circumstantial. The defense presented evidence that the boot print in Geraldine's trailer was made by the most common work boot in the world. So this common work boot, which probably one of those boots that could be bought off of Walmart's shelf, you know, one of those cheap pair of work boots, a lot of people own those. So they can't actually say that just because Derrick Todd Lee owned a pair of boots that are similar to that actual footprint belonged to him. And at one point, Derrick Todd Lee actually tried to fire his attorney, who was public defender Tommy Thompson. The jury also heard testimony from DeSoto's husband, who was very emotional, and the man's defense attorney tried to implicate him in the crime. So apparently, in case you missed part one, DeSoto's husband was actually firstly the only suspect to that crime, and it wasn't until DNA evidence ruled that Derrick Todd Lee was linked to being the killer that DeSoto husband was actually let off of being the suspect and charged with that crime. So I can imagine that her husband was extremely emotional at this trial because he was being framed or called out for murdering his wife, and he in fact did not do it. He was about to be charged for a crime he did not commit. So I guarantee you that man had every reason to be upset. First and foremost, his wife just died. Secondly, he was being accused of killing her. So in 2004, Derrick Todd Lee was convicted of second-degree murder, and this was on August 10th, 2004. And this was in the case of DeSoto, and he was automatically sentenced to life in prison. On October 12th, Derrick Todd Lee was convicted of first-degree murder in the slaying of Pace. And jurors issued their unanimous decision only after 1 hour and 20 minutes of receiving the case. So it didn't take them long to know that Derrick Todd Lee was the actual suspect in Pace's murder. In December 2004, the sentence was given out and Lee was put on death row. 2015, the Louisiana Supreme Court denied Derrick Todd Lee's appeal he submitted on September 18, 2015, to overturn the first-degree murder conviction and the death sentence. Justice Scott Cricken wrote in a decision that evidence was showing that Derrick Todd Lee killed Pace in a brutal and vicious manner that was both overwhelming and very, very horrific. On January 16, 2016, Derrick Todd Lee was actually rushed to the hospital from his confinement in Angola prison due to an unknown medical issue. Derrick Todd Lee was moved from the Louisiana State Penitentiary at Angola because of unspecified health problems. And on January 21st, 2016, so pretty much a week later, Derrick Todd Lee wouldn't live long enough to carry out the sentence that was given to him, because a week later, after he was rushed from Angola prison to the hospital, he would die shortly before 9 a.m. on January 21st, 2016, while receiving medical care at a Baton Rouge hospital. At the time of his death, Derrick Todd Lee was 47 years old. Pamela Board, who was a spokeswoman with Louisiana Department of Safety and Corrections, said Derrick Todd Lee died shortly before 9 a.m. while being treated at the hospital, and an autopsy will be performed to determine that specific cause of death. And Derrick Todd Lee reported to the prison officials that he had actually had recent troubles with his pacemaker. And before his murder charges, Derrick Todd Lee was arrested for stalking women, watching them in their homes, just like that FBI profile literally nailed it. And despite all of that, he was actually overlooked because, they originally thought he was white. So Derrick Todd Lee, through it all, was never remorseful in any of his actions. He always tried to play like he still didn't do it and he was innocent, and this was just a big conspiracy theory against him. So, is that why so many people hated him? So, as Clayton replied, he said, a lot of times serial killers, they deny all the way to the end. And that's what Derrick Todd Lee did. We had him red-handed with DNA placing him here and there and at each crime scene. And he just denied it till the end. And it played a role with the juries. Jurors want you to man up and accept responsibility to what you have done. And the fact that he had no remorse and the fact that he did not own up to what he had done, it created that scenario, for lack of a better word, that would actually have no remorse for people like him. So, in the event that Derrick Todd Lee would actually be remorseful for his murders or actually admit that he created these murders, he probably would have got off a death row. Maybe not, because he was just like a serial killer and he would have been convicted on everything, but his health obviously would not let him see the death penalty, because he died not long after being sentenced to Angola at 47 years old. So, the most compelling testimony came from Diane Alexander, who was the woman who survived Derrick Todd Lee's attack in Breaux Bridge. DNA linked Derrick Todd Lee to the attempted rape and murder of her back in July of 2002. And Diane Alexander stared and pointed at Derrick Todd Lee, saying she was positive he was the man who attacked her. And she said the following: "I am definitely sure. While my eyes were closed, I have never forgotten your face." Prosecutors say that Diane Alexander's testimony was invaluable because they believed her attack closely mirrored what happened to DeSoto. And Diane testified that the man who almost strangled her to death came up to her door, politely asked to use the phone for directions, and then pushed his way inside after hearing her husband wasn't home. Derrick Todd Lee severely beat and attempted to rape Diane Alexander in her Breaux Bridge home. And if it wasn't because Diane Alexander's son interrupted the attack, he would have actually succeeded in raping and possibly murdering Diane Alexander. But luckily her son was able to walk in at the time of the attack. But he chased Derrick Todd Lee down the road, but Derrick Todd Lee actually got away as he went out the back door. So there was a lot of back and forth, Derrick Todd Lee trying to appeal, and some assignments of error that occurred within all of this happening in court. So, assignment error number 1, Derrick Todd Lee argued that in light of the recent convictions, providing for jury verdicts of 10-2 in cases in which punishment is necessarily confinement at hard labor violates the 6th and 14th Amendments of the United States Constitution. And he contended that 11-1 verdict was unconstitutional. The state cited Louisiana verdicts contend that this issue is well settled and that the Louisiana Supreme Court has held that a non-unanimous jury verdict does not violate the Constitution. The punishment for second-degree murder is confinement for life at hard labor, provided that in cases where punishment is necessary at hard labor for the case shall be tried by a jury composed of 12 jurors, 10 of whom must concur to render a verdict. 8 state and federal a criminal conviction by a less than unanimous jury does not violate a defendant's right to trial by jury specified in the 6th Amendment and made applicable by the states on the 14th Amendment. So what all that humble jumble stated was, he was trying to say that because it was a 10-2 verdict with the jury, that was unconstitutional due to the 6th and the 14th Amendments. However, the Louisiana Supreme Court denied that claim, stating that it was not because it was part of the 6th and 14th Amendment. So, in assignment error number 2, Derrick Todd Lee stated that his DNA sample was illegally obtained without a search warrant and that the trial court erred in denying this motion to suppress the DNA evidence. He said that the DNA was obtained by a subpoena requested by Louisiana Attorney General's office. Derrick Todd Lee's DNA profile was matched to the DNA found on victim in that case, and also on DNA victim of Diane Alexander. And apparently the motion for the subpoena was presented to Judge George H. Ware of the 20th Judicial District. And that motion explained that Attorney General's office was involved in an investigation of the disappearance of Randy Muber and the homicide of Connie Warner, both residents of Zachary, Louisiana. That DNA specimen of the defendant was necessary to complete that investigation. The motion indicated that the Department of Justice Attorney General's office had been assisting the Zachary Police Department since April 27th of 1999. And in that same investigation, the Zachary subdivision, the disappearance of Ms. Muber from Zachary on or about April 18, 1998, and the homicide of Mrs. Warner in August of 1992. So that motion further stated that the evidence at the Muber residence indicated that she was severely beaten and abducted from her residence, and that the incident occurred during a 4-hour period between the hours of 10:30 p.m. on April 18th and 2:30 a.m. on April 19th of 1998. The Zachary police knew the defendant had been arrested as a peeping Tom in the same Zachary subdivision and in St. Francisville, Louisiana. The motion further stated that on April 20th, 1998, Zachary police officers went to Derrick Todd Lee's residence and, with his consent, conducted a cursory search of his residence before being asked by him to leave, and since that time, Derrick Todd Lee remained a viable suspect in the disappearance of Randy Muber and a possible suspect in the deaths of 5 females throughout Baton Rouge and Lafayette who had been linked by DNA profiling to him. So, this motion further indicated that investigators from the Attorney General's office interviewed Derrick Todd Lee and his girlfriend Cassandra Green, who both indicated separately that on April 18th about 10:30 p.m. they were at a bar in St. Francisville. When they got into an argument, Cassandra left and she went home. Derrick Todd Lee drove to a bar in Alson, Louisiana, and he then left and drove to Mrs. Green's home in Jackson, where he arrived about 1 a.m. on April 19th. That route to Mrs. Green's home took him directly by entrance to the Zachary subdivision. Derrick Todd Lee talked to Miss Green a few minutes and drove to his home in St. Francisville. And this motion also alleged that Alson Lounge was open for business on April 18th and April 19th. It detailed that Derrick Todd Lee's specific arrests and convictions for attempted unauthorized entry of an inhabited dwelling, simple burglary, peeping Tom, trespassing, stalking, and aggravated battery, and noted that that was on some of his arrests in Zachary, Louisiana. So they stated that Derrick Todd Lee was not incarcerated on the dates of Randy Buer's disappearance and the murder of Connie Warner, or of the murders of Charlotte Pace, Gina Green, Pam Kennemore, Trinisha Colomb, and Kanye Yoder. Finally, the motion also indicated that a confidential source told investigators that Derrick Todd Lee had come to his home in Jackson, Louisiana around midnight, a night or two after Randy Buer's disappearance. So, the Derrick Todd Lee was accompanied to his residence by this one person who was a witness, and they had a long-barreled revolver in the vehicle. After 10 to 15 minutes of Derrick Todd Lee's residence, Derrick Todd Lee drove this witness back to his home. Derrick Todd Lee told this witness that he was being harassed by Zachary police about the missing woman. The next day, that witness heard a news report about a missing Zachary woman. The motion did not give any other specific information as to the timing of Derrick Todd Lee's statement. An order was signed by Judge Ware on May 5, 2003, and that order authorized the issuance of a subpoena and directing that Derrick Todd Lee would produce a DNA sample. Subsequently, after Derrick Todd Lee's DNA was tested and compared, lab reports were issued indicating a high probability that the DNA found on the victim in the Jerry Lynn DeSoto and on the DNA who survived the attack, which would be Diane Alexander, was that of Derrick Todd Lee. At the motion to suppress hearing held on May 6, 2004, which, oh my God, that's my birthday. Not 2004, but May 6. Anyways, there was a motion to suppress hearing held on May 6, 2004, and the only witness called by the state was Danny Mixon, an investigator with the Attorney General's office. Mixon testified that he was assigned in April of 1999 to help the Zachary police investigate the Warner and Buer cases in which Derrick Todd Lee was the main suspect. Connie Warner was killed in 1992, and Randy Buer, whose body has never been found, disappeared in 1998. The two victims lived in the same Zachary subdivision, and Mr. Mixon further testified that Derrick Todd Lee had been arrested on 2 counts of peeping Tom in that same Zachary subdivision for being a peeping Tom and stalking. And this also occurred in St. Francisville. Mr. Mixon testified that a search warrant was not sought because it was believed the subpoena was sufficient enough to obtain the DNA sample from Derrick Todd Lee. He noted that he had previously used a subpoena for handwriting samples, phone records, and fingerprints. Excuse me. Mixon and Zachary police officer Ray Day approached Judge Ware to have that subpoena issued. Mixon noted that Judge Ware suggested a show cause hearing may be necessary. And during Mixon's meeting with the judge, the Attorney General's office was contacted, and the use of subpoena to obtain the DNA sample was advocated. So they had permission to use that subpoena and not a search warrant to obtain Derrick Todd Lee's DNA. So that motion on error number 2 is now involved because they had permission that the subpoena was sufficient enough to be able to obtain Derrick Todd Lee's DNA. So Judge Ware then signed that order authorizing the issuance of the subpoena to Mixon, and Mixon testified that that subpoena was prepared in conjunction with Warner and Buer's cases. He noted that Derrick Todd Lee had been caught on more than one occasion walking, prowling, and peeping in windows in the Oak Shadow subdivision in Zachary, which both Miss Warner and Miss Buer had lived. The investigation further indicated that Miss Buer was attacked and abducted between the hours of 10:30 p.m. on Saturday, August 18, 1998, and 2:30 a.m. on August 19, 1998. During that time, Derrick Todd Lee admitted to driving a route that would have taken him past Miss Buer's Zachary subdivision. However, Mixon acknowledged that this route was the shortest route for the defendant to follow to reach his destination, as to the fact that the defendant was not in custody on the days of Warner and Buer attacks. And Mixon further acknowledged that thousands of people were not in jail on those dates. So he was stating that he did not say that Derrick Todd Lee was the exact person. He just says that there was probable cause, there was enough circumstantial evidence leading to him believing that he would be a potential suspect. So Mixon testified that the information received from that particular witness that, seen that gun, the long barrel shotgun and everything in Derrick Todd Lee's vehicle, he said that that witness stated he had gone with the defendant to his home. So he went with Derrick Todd Lee to his home a night or two after Randy Muir's disappearance, and that the defendant went back to the house but did not turn on the lights. When he returned to the vehicle, that witness saw that Derrick Todd Lee put a revolver in the console of his truck. The defendant, Derrick Todd Lee, told that witness that the Zachary police were harassing him about a missing woman from Zachary who was white. So, this witness witnessed Derrick Todd Lee go to his home, did not turn the lights on, and then get back in the vehicle with a revolver. At the conclusion of the hearing, Judge Ware denied the motion to suppress that merit of two error. The judge found that the subpoena was essentially a search warrant and that the motion or the subpoena provided sufficient facts to establish probable cause in the fact that Derrick Todd Lee subsequently filed an application for supervisory writs, which was denied. So Derrick Todd Lee was linked by DNA tests to the deaths of 7 women in the areas in Louisiana, and in 2004, Derrick Todd Lee was convicted in separate trials of the murders of Geraldine DeSoto and Charlotte Murray Pace. The Pace trial resulted in his death sentence. Newspapers suggested Derrick Todd Lee was responsible for other unsolved murders in the area, but the police lacked that DNA evidence to prove those connections. After Derrick Todd Lee's arrest, it was discovered that another serial killer, who we will be covering, by the way, Sean Vincent Gillis, was operating in the Baton Rouge area during the same time as Lee. So, it could just be these 7 women, and then Gillis would be responsible for the others. And I just had an epiphany while reading this, by the way. Oh my God. This man, Sean Vincent Gillis, I swear, that name rings a bell with me. Because, in case you didn't realize, I was formerly a correctional officer at the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, TDCJ. And I was a correctional officer at the Smith unit in Lamesa, Texas. And I remember a prisoner in there with the last name Gillis. I'm going to have to dig deep into that brain of mine and see if that's what it is. I do recall that, if I'm not mistaken, Sean Gillis, which we will be covering, by the way, if I'm not mistaken, that offender that I'm referring to, I want to say he killed his mom and his grandma. Oh my God. Anyways, I digress, but that is just crazy. That just came to me like that. So, as you know, Derrick Todd Lee died on January 21st, 2016, and the autopsy revealed that he died of heart disease, where he was transported from the Louisiana State Penitentiary, Angola, and he would never see execution. So, Louisiana's Deputy Attorney General, I'ma speak today, y'all. Louisiana's Deputy Attorney General John Snequill was one of the 2 state prosecutors to secure murder convictions against Derrick Todd Lee in 2 separate cases. And Derrick Todd Lee talked his way into his victims' homes. He acted like he broke down, he needed a call, he needed directions, whatever the case in. And then when he found out that the women were home alone, that's whenever he attacked them. And according to Louisiana Deputy Attorney General John, he stated the following: a lot of these places didn't show any evidence of forced entry. He tried to be more of a charmer than a bully. So, Louisiana Deputy Attorney General John prosecuted Derrick Todd Lee for first-degree murder of Charlotte Murray Pace, who was brutally killed in 2002, and the attempted murder of Diane Alexander, who was the woman who survived his attack in Breaux Bridge. And Diane's attack was one that was just crazy, because she escaped a vicious attack by a man who came to her front door and asked to use her phone. She was able to provide a physical description of her attacker, which resulted in a sketch that literally, to the T, resembled Derrick Todd Lee. And I will post that sketch into the show notes and across the video if you're watching on YouTube, or on the little clips as I post the little highlights on social media. So, Diane Alexander gave the jury the best example of how he got to his victims. He asked her if she had a portable phone he could use outside of on her front porch, and as soon as she opened her door to give him the phone, he immediately changed his tone from being very polite and very nice. Within minutes, he was assaulting her. But Derrick Todd Lee didn't get the chance to kill Diane Alexander because her son showed up from school, causing him to flee out the back door. And police believe that Diane Alexander is Derrick Todd Lee's only surviving victim. So the methods we're going to get into. Derrick Todd Lee had methods varied with each murder. So there were similarities between the crimes, including the removal of cell phones from the victims' belongings and a lack of any visible signs of forced entry into the location where each victim was attacked. 2 of the victims' bodies were discovered at Whiskey Bay, which was a boat launch, was 30 miles west of Baton Rouge, just off of Interstate 10. And as a result of an inaccurate FBI profile at first, because, again, they thought the man would be a white male, but it would be later known that obviously it was not the case. And on the error of eyewitness accounts, police originally believed the serial killer was going to be a white man. Police therefore administered thousands of DNA tests of white men in the area and surrounding areas of the murders. They had no leads, and police then allowed the now defunct company DNA Prints Genomics to access DNA left at the crime scenes. And the DNA Print Genomics generated an ancestry profile indicated that the suspect was then, ruled correctly, 85% African American descent, which changed the course of the investigation. Police then knew they were searching for a black man for the January 2002 slaying of Geraldine Barr DeSoto, and not her husband. So, more specific analysis of the DNA evidence found underneath the fingernails of Geraldine DeSoto linked Derrick Todd Lee to that 21-year-old woman's death in Aldis, Louisiana. So, between the DNA evidence gathered from each of the victims, a psychological profile made by Mary Ellen O'Toole, and a police sketch based on Alexander's description, they went public with that type of information. And police in the town of Zachary recognized the man by a recent peeping Tom incident they had investigated, and they called the Baton Rouge police to let them know they knew who the person in the sketch was. And the Zachary Police Department let the Baton Rouge Department know that it had a DNA sample from Derrick Todd Lee due to a prior murder investigation from 6 to 8 months earlier. And that DNA lab ran and compared those samples, and that's how they ended up matching the DNA to Derrick Todd Lee for all 7 murders. Mary Ann O'Toole, who is a PhD, had spent her career studying the criminal mind. One of the most senior profilers for the FBI until she retired in 2009. And during her career, she worked on many high-profile cases, including Elizabeth Smart abduction and the Unabomber and the Green River Killer. Diane Alexander's survival and description of Derrick Todd Lee assisted investigators in his arrest. And Diane Alexander felt she deserved Lafayette Crime Stoppers' public reward offering of $100,000 for information leading to the arrest of Derrick Todd Lee. On or about August 14, 2003, Diane Alexander contacted Lafayette Crime Stoppers and inquired about the offer. It was then stated that Lafayette Crime Stoppers informed her that she was not eligible to receive the reward. On February 22, 2006, Diane Alexander hired an attorney to pursue that case because she felt that she deserved the Crime Stopper reward of $100,000 because she had information leading to the arrest of Derrick Todd Lee because of her well-described remembrance of him that they created that sketch for the Zachary Police Department to actually identify him. So, she hired her attorney, which was Clayton Burgess, and Lafayette Crime Stoppers claimed that the reward offer expired on August 1st, 2003, and that although Diane Alexander had gone to the police, she did not contact Lafayette Crime Stoppers before August 1st, 2003. And furthermore, Lafayette Crime Stoppers claimed that Alexander did not use the tipster hotline and thereby did not comply with the form, terms, or conditions required by Lafayette Crime Stoppers in the case. So the case was actually decided based on Lafayette Crime Stoppers' favor. So, in case y'all didn't catch that, they said the reward expired on August 1st, 2003. Diane contacted them on August 14th, which would be 13 days. 13 days after the reward expired. But, I mean, Crime Stoppers do have certain rules and regulations into how you would receive the money from these rewards. And just because she went to the police department, I mean, I get it. That's that small little clause where they got that little loophole where they didn't have to pay out that $100,000 because she did not contact them until 13 days after the reward expired. That is just screwed up. As the fact that she should get some type of justice because this woman survived Derrick Todd Lee. That's maybe not from Crime Stoppers, but I mean, damn. Derrick Todd Lee, I mean, even though he didn't have a pot to piss in, but like, it's just insane. So the motive of Derrick Todd Lee. He targeted random women who were all successful and in the working class. He attacked his victims in his home, with the exception of being Trinisha Colomb, who was attacked near a gravesite of her mother. Derrick Todd Lee would kill them through various ways, such as strangulation, stabbing, and bludgeoning. He would also sexually assault them before their deaths. So, with all of this, and I know this firsthand because, of course, my children's father was arrested. Excuse me. But with arrest and people in small towns, especially like the town I live in, people develop their own stories. They come up with these rumors and they pass this bullshit around like lies. And this happened in the Derrick Todd Lee case as well. They had this crying baby rumor that was passing around, and this happened in early 2003. An urban legend began to circulate that Derrick Todd Lee was using the taped sounds of a crying baby to lure his victims to the door. The Baton Rouge police were quickly to identify that the information was coming from their office. So, the police department was the one responsible for creating this fucking rumor of apparently Derrick Todd Lee playing a recording of a baby crying, and this is what led these victims to their demise. How fucking crazy is that? So, this also fueled a rumor where there was a Criminal Minds episode in season 3 titled The Children of the Dark and the Tabula Rasa, that Lee and a crying baby rumor was mentioned in both of those type of episodes in Criminal Minds. So Criminal Minds went off of this bullshit ass rumor of this crying baby that was indicated by the Baton Rouge Police Department, And they aired that in 2 of their episodes of Children of the Dark and the Tabula Rasa series. Derrick Todd Lee's murders were some of the most perplexing. And Richie Johnson, who was a liaison and a lead investigator for the district attorney's office during 2002, during the death of Fowler and DeSoto, he said that himself, he thought that the murders of Derrick Todd Lee was so freaking perplexed. And he also stated the following: it was absolutely random. That's why it was so hard to catch him. He had a very unique method of operation. It was always a female that was alone, and he always put the bodies where they could be found. Which is interesting in itself, because most people don't want their bodies to be found. Like, if they're ditching a body, they don't want them to be found. So, was that low IQ of Derrick Todd Lee accurate? That he just didn't think? Or did he want the bodies to actually be found? See, we will never freaking know. And of course, the rumor mill does not do us justice. So, Mary Ann Fowler's body was never discovered. Authorities did not try Derrick Todd Lee for her death, but District Attorney Liaison Johnson said he is 100% positive that Derrick Todd Lee was responsible for Mary Ann Fowler's death, as Mary Ann Fowler was last seen at the subway on Louisiana Highway 415 on Christmas Eve, which was less than a year after Geraldine DeSoto's murder. Witnesses inside Subway shop said that they saw her vehicle still in the parking lot after she made a purchase and went outside to see if she was okay. And according to the West Side Journal, this is what was said by these witnesses at the subway after her abduction. They believed that that was her car was still at the subway, and she was abducted in a subway. They discovered her items scattered across the parking lot about the same time as a white pickup truck was leaving the parking lot. And it wasn't until 2004 that Mary Ann Fowler was actually declared deceased. And John Pritchett, who was Mary Ann Fowler's son, stated the following: I was hopeful. Even though Derrick Todd Lee was a devil, I thought somehow something would happen and he would let me know where my mom was. So, John Pritchett, Mary Ann Fowler's son, would never get the answers to where his mother's body is. And he remembers the night his mother went missing all too well. And John Pritchett stated that his job asked him to work on Christmas, so he asked his mom to celebrate the holiday with him and his children at his home on Christmas Eve instead, since he was going to be at work on Christmas. But Mary Ann Fowler decided to visit her husband, Jerry Fowler, who was the former state elections commissioner, and he was serving time in federal prison in Beaumont, Texas. So, Jerry Fowler, which would be Mary Ann Fowler's husband, was incarcerated in Beaumont, Texas, and she decided to go visit her husband in Texas instead of having Christmas with her son on Christmas Eve because he had to work on Christmas Day. So that same night, John Pritchett said that he was traveling down Highway 415 on his way home, and he remembered seeing police lights on the side of the road. When he got home, there was a message on his answering machine from the sheriff's office asking him to come in and identify his mother's belongings. And Mary Ann Fowler's belongings were found in the subway parking lot. So John initially thought that she just left it in the shopping buggy or she misplaced it. And when he arrived at the sheriff's office, that's whenever a deputy actually introduced him to an FBI agent. And he knew then something was wrong. So, this is what John stated. I'll never forgive myself. Had I tried harder to get her to come with me, none of this would have ever happened. People don't understand. It hurts to lose a loved one. But when one is taken from you, it's not a disease. Even with a car wreck, there's something you can understand when that happens. You can put your finger on it. But for your mother to go into a sandwich shop and come out and have some asshole grab her and murder her, you can't understand how this can happen. As a man, you always want to protect your family. And he also said, I just feel like I didn't do that. It may be an ego thing, or maybe I'm just old school. But he said that he had nowhere to go put flowers. He had no closure. And he had little pleasure knowing that Derrick Todd Lee was dead. And during Derrick Todd Lee's killings, gun sales and self-defense classes were going through the roof across the region because they were trying to arm themselves and protect themselves from this serial killer. And Johnson stated that everyone was paralyzed. Females just didn't feel comfortable. And Derrick Todd Lee instilled a lot of fear in people in Louisiana. So the death of convicted serial killer Derrick Todd Lee brings some closure to some of the communities, except for obviously Fowler's son, across South Louisiana, and questions still linger in West Baton Rouge. The serial killer's DNA eventually tied him to the 7 unsolved murders. Randy Muber, April 1998. Gina Wilson Green, September 2001. Geraldine Bar de Soto, January 2002. Charlotte Murray Pace, May 2002. Pam Kennemore, July of 2002. Trenisha Dean Collum, November 2002. And finally, Carrie Lynn Yoder in March of 2003. So, this is the case of Derrick Todd Lee. What do you think? Do you think Derrick Todd Lee has other victims out there and that these 7 were just a hint of what he did? Or do you believe that Sean Vincent Gillis was responsible for the other murders in the area? I mean, I'm interested to know. Also, if y'all had any further information in reference to Derrick Todd Lee or any of his victims, and y'all would like to speak on behalf of that, I would love to hear from you. Y'all could reach us out on any of our social media at Criminalist Behavior Podcast. We're on all the social media, TikTok, Facebook, Insta, Threads, and Tumblr. You can also reach us by email at criminalbehaviorpodcast@gmail.com. And you can visit our website at www.criminalistbehavior-louisianatruecrimepodcast.com. And you could just submit any information there. I would love to hear from you. So, like I said in the beginning of the synopsis of this episode, Derrick Todd Lee's wife was in denial of her husband's transgressions. She did not believe that her husband was the serial killer. And that says something, because Derrick Todd Lee wasn't faithful to her because he had his girlfriend Cassandra Green. Like, that's just insane. So, write in. I love to hear. And please like, follow, subscribe to Criminalist Behavior Podcast. And come back next week because we got another gruesome case for you. And I'm sorry, I just lost my place. Give me a second. Give me a second. So, our next case is Mary Jane Jackson. And y'all don't want to miss that. So, if you enjoyed our show, please rate and review us in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Amazon Music, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Until then, this is your host, Sarah Suye. And share us, y'all. Share us. 'Tis the season to be jolly because, oh my God, we need the subscribers, likes, and follows, and reviews. I love to know. I love to hear from my fans. So thank y'all for listening, and I really hope y'all have a great night, a great Christmas, as Christmas for us at this time is like 8 days away. Oh my God, crazy. Still need to wrap all my presents, but y'all have a wonderful night, and until next time, bye.